The European Parliament corruption scandal has eroded the trust in the European Union. Now the institutions are making fresh efforts to gain credibility and transparency. On the Global Conversation, I will talk about this with Vera Jourova, the Vice President of the European Commission. Vera Jourova, thanks very much for being on Euronews. 6 months has passed since one of the biggest corruption scandals of the history of the European Union, and according to the latest polls, the majority of the Europeans, in fact 60% of them, are not happy about how the EU is dealing with corruption. Are you surprised?
It does not surprise me, but at the same time it gives me another impulse to do something about that. And it doesn't matter where the scandal appeared. Yeah? It was one of the institutions, probably the failure more of individual people than of the system. But what can the citizens think? Well-paid politicians, they have undeserved privileges. We don't know which standards and whether there is some ethics. Too many questions and too little answers. So that's why we came with the anti-corruption package, which also covers EU institutions. And today I presented the first ever European ethics body, which should cover all key EU institutions.
Let's talk about this new ethics body, because it will set the future standards for all of the EU institutions. But NGOs, MEPs are demanding that the control should be not connected to the European Union, but should be independent. Why is it not happening?
Well, the ethics body is filling in the gap, because just imagine each of the institutions have some internal structure which should do the job. This is the ethics body should not replace these institutional arrangements. There are people who should go after disciplinary breaches and should sanction these cases. So the ethics body will fill in the gap, the roof above all the institutions, and work on unified standards will then reflect in the work of each institution. And why not independent? Well, I think that it's important that the ethics body will be composed of the people who know the work and the role of each institution. That's why I propose something which will be very practical. There will be 10 people sitting around the table. I speak about the political level, the vice presidents of each institution or some other high-level official. And there will be 5 independent experts invited to work together with the representatives of the institutions. I want the ethics body to be meaningful, to be practical, and to be transparent. So the standards which the ethics body will agree on will be known to the public. Referring to your first question, what the people can think about us, I think that they should know the rules regarding trips, gifts, declarations of assets, what the politicians do after the mandate. Well, I think that the people have the right to see clear standards.
For example, these new standards will prevent in the future Commission Director General taking free flights, free hotel rooms paid by foreign actors like Qatar.
Honestly, I don't understand how this can be happening, because either I am on a business trip and then it has to be blessed by the institution and paid by the institution I work for, or it is a private trip and then I pay it myself. I don't see any space for anything else, and I think that this is exactly what the ethics body should clarify, and we should agree on it.
Now 9 institutions have to find a common ground about the future ethics rules. Do you think they will be strong enough, and what do you expect content-wise? Can you give us a couple of examples?
They will have to be higher than they are now. I'm convinced about that. And of course, when you look at those 10 institutions, I count also European Investment Bank, so we are 10 together. Of course, it depends whether all the institutions will subscribe, will become the partners in this, but I hope so. We will set high standards for what I mentioned, for the declarations of assets, for the gifts, for the trips, for the post-mandate activities. And it might be the case that the ethics body will set the standards which will be lower in some of the institutions. I will give you an example which you wanted, the bankers. We should have European Central Bank there and European Investment Bank. There are very strict rules for the members of the bodies when it comes to the declarations of assets.
Do you think also the 700 MEPs are in line to push the standards higher?
If you ask all of them, they will tell you yes. I spoke to many members of the parliament. Of course, the parliament is a special institution. There are directly elected people. There is always a discussion about the freedom of the mandate or about their immunities. This is very, very fair to discuss all these things. But at the same time, there should be high enough equal standards for everyone. In the parliament, we see quite different opinions from different political clubs, and I am ready to discuss with all.
And how about investigations and sanctions for these ethical rules?
Well, it has to remain in the institutions which have a strong legal basis to do that. I know it sounds too legalistic, but I have to recall that this ethics body will be established on the basis of the agreement, and it's not foreseen in the treaty, and it's not going to be established on the basis of the law. Once you work for such a body established by the law, you are authorized to look into the private documents and to different kinds of materials. You are authorized to inquire the people, and you are authorized to sanction the people. And it really requires strongest possible legal authorization. And this is what the ethics body will not have.
We are 1 year ahead of the next European Parliament elections. Are you afraid that foreign actors will try to influence the campaign and they might actually derail the campaign ahead of the Parliament elections, for example, with fake news campaign or disinformation?
I do believe they will not win because we do everything to protect the elections against hidden manipulation and against different kinds of interferences. But that for sure there will be strong influence, and there will be a big pressure from different hostile actors to interfere into the electoral processes. That's why we are already alerting the member states which have the obligation to organize the elections to somehow fortify the systems, also against the cyber attacks, but also against the coordinated campaigns using disinformation.
To fight foreign influence, the Commission is also proposing a new package called Defense of Democracy, but NGOs were protesting against this legislation. They said it's very similar to the Russian Foreign Agents Act. So after this criticism, will you amend this legislation to satisfy NGOs?
The criticism was based on the lack of information about what we plan. And I don't criticize anyone. I think that it's mainly on us to inform all who might feel affected by that what we plan. What we plan is the high level of transparency about the financial flows into Europe. And I think that it's far from the Georgian law or even American law or Australian law, which is the criminal justice piece of law. No labeling, no foreign agents, no stigmatizing. We even want to embed into the law the safeguard against the possible abuse from the side of some member states, not to go beyond the requests or requirements of the law. But you asked about the process also. We admitted that we need more time for two things. For the intense consultations with all who raised voices and who expressed concerns, especially the NGOs. I will simplify that, but many others also from the member states' official places. We heard a lot of question marks. I will use this summer for consultations on the basis of already very precise text, so that we know what we speak about. The second thing what we need to do is to try to collect data which will give us more certainty about how big the problem is. To collect such data is not an easy thing, because it's mainly in the position of the member states' secret services and security agencies. So we are now exploring the way how to get reliable data. So we will do two things over summer, and then in autumn we will come back to that, because I am convinced we need such law. And if not, we will be the only democratic space which doesn't have a law which at least wants to increase transparency and give us a chance to know who is paid by third countries' governments. This is the last thing I want to say on the substance, because also there was a criticism that all the money coming from abroad. No, it will be about the money paid by third countries' governments and state organizations.
Do you think social media platforms, big social media platforms, are doing enough to fight disinformation? Because the current European system is on voluntary basis, and Twitter is leaving even that system.
Well, soon we will have the Digital Services Act in force, and it will be, it is legally binding, heavyweight legislation, which seeks to increase the responsibility of the platforms. And it's a reaction of something which we saw evolving over years, that the platforms are grabbing too much power and are reluctant to take relevant responsibility. Before that, and parallel with that, we have the Code of Practice against disinformation, which indeed is a voluntary agreement. At this moment, we have 44 signatories. We have all the big platforms except Twitter. We can do a lot with it, but of course it has some gaps still. What I want to change, first of all, better address Russia and pro-Kremlin disinformation, because this is clear-cut case. The war propaganda has to be removed, and we are in the information war, and so there should be no compromise. Second, we want the platforms to consistently moderate and invest in fact-checking. It cannot be done only in English or German. It has to be done in all member states' languages. And the tricky thing is that the more you go to the east of Europe, the bigger the pressure from Russian propaganda appears. So we want them to invest in fact-checking in these countries. We see big influence of Russian propaganda on Slovakia, on Bulgarian public opinion. We see increased pressures on German communities, and especially using some domestic proxies. And this is a new thing when the Russian propaganda is being taken over by the extremist parties in the EU. This is dangerous new stage. So better moderation. The third thing what we want from the platforms is to enable the researchers better access to data. We need the researchers to analyze the situation. When I say we, the rules makers, because I would like internet and social media to remain the free zone for free speech. So also my concern is not to overshoot with the rules which we are taking, but to come with proportionate necessary measures. We need to know what's happening, and the researchers should help us with serious, thorough analysis. The fourth thing, and this is a new agenda, and I asked on Monday the platforms to consider that, it's the new development in generative artificial intelligence. And here again the code can be a quick vehicle, a quick response.
This is actually the next question, because ChatGPT is raising concerns about fake news, impersonalization. A lot of people are worried about generally the spread of the artificial intelligence. And are you afraid that in the future the line between reality and fiction will disappear?
Not, but in case the people themselves, those who read and see the visuals are able to see that this concrete thing is the production of AI. And we have to be stubborn on that. We have to insist that the production of artificial intelligence is being properly and in a clear and understandable way labeled. We have an example of, I will take the fact-checking, which we want to be up and running in the member states. Once the piece of disinformation is being labeled and the facts are added, we see big change in behavior of the user. In most of the cases, such disinformation is not sent further. The people think about it. So the same logic, I believe, will work when the people see that this is the production of robot. I can take it seriously, I may not, but I would like to say that we are in a critical moment in history when we have to defend real people. How to do it? Not to give robots the freedom of speech, not to give robots the automaticity in reach, and not to protect the production of robots by copyright. I think these are very simple principles, always based on the mantra that we have to protect the existing rights of real people.
When you look at the rule of law battle between the European Union and Poland and Hungary, there are new tools that the EU is using, especially in the case of Hungary, suspensions of EU payments. Do you think this will bring the results closer?
We see it on Hungary that the conditionality and the freezing of the funding brings results after many years of stabilization of the situation, which we didn't want to see from the point of view of the rule of law. Now we see that in Hungary there is judiciary reform ongoing. There is a lot of measures taken to increase the protection of EU funding. So the Hungarian professionals, the officials are doing their best to convince us that the things will be put in order in Hungary. Of course, we would like to see broader action, but for the moment, I have to say that the financial pressure is maybe more successful than maybe some legal measures. But we have to do everything, also using the infringements and Article 7.
Talking about infringement, the European Commission just launched an infringement against Poland because they are proposing a new law which is actually inwards against foreign pressure, foreign influence. But in reality, many NGOs and the opposition is afraid that it can be used as a political weapon against them. So how do you see this issue?
Well, we expressed it by a very quick reaction on this law, unprecedented quick reaction, because we see this law as the law endangering democratic battle or democratic way of doing things. Of course, there will be elections in Poland, but even if there are not elections so early, we would have to react, because this is a principal thing. I always say we have to protect elections better, and there was one of your questions on whether it could be influenced by malicious actors. And up to now, I always saw the danger that there will be the political opponents in the campaign who will have to play the game up the hill, and there will be no referee to fairly decide. But this is a new chapter, because the Polish law says that some teams, some people cannot enter the playground. And that's why, regardless of the upcoming elections in Poland, we had to react, because to establish the purely political body, which should have the competencies compared with prosecutors or judges, according to how we assess the situation, it's breaching the EU law.
Vera Jourova, thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you very much.